Me, my network, I'm here and I'm super excited.
Okay. Hello, everyone. We are going to get started. Uzuma, if you could, I might not see the participants list after this, so if you can let people in if there's any pop-ups for people being in the waiting room. But thank you so much for joining us. My name is Ya, and today if you happen to just hop on, which I hope is not the case, you are at the Futuring Towards Freedom virtual panel, and I'll get more into that in a second. Um, so just a quick introduction. So we are Future Inventions. This is Lex Fafega, Uzuma Oji, and me. And we're three friends and also collaborators who, as of last year, around August, have started holding these educational sessions together around how we might reimagine technology. We've been doing this so far in London and in Abuja through monthly study groups as well as design workshops or virtual events at the end of the month to tap into our more global network. A bit about our mission. So, in summary, when we did begin, we tried to create some guiding principles that we could use both to hold ourselves to account and explain a bit about what our goals were as a collective. And they are to educate ourselves on how power shapes the way technologies are developed and distributed, to disrupt the binary between user and creator by engaging in collective research and ideation, to refuse the logic of techno-solutionism by recognizing that the innovation necessary for change is not confined to tools or products, to harness ancestral knowledge and non-Western lineages of science in our practice, to value technology that affirms all sentient life and not just that of humans. And it's really exciting that we have Adi with us here today because this is actually something that we learned from Afrotectopia and their definition of technology as an extension of sentient capability. And lastly, to call in futures which are yet to happen but must. So we are really excited for today. It's a really special one also because it happens to be the last session in our programming for Cycle 1. We've done 12 events over the past 4 months. This feels like a really apt way to a really apt way to end. I also forgot to say at the beginning, but please do feel free to introduce yourself in the chat, say how you're feeling. So we can, get to know a bit more about who's in the room. Maybe you can say where you are, if you've been to any of these events before. But in just to recap, so we began in November with Intro to Digital Colonialism, where we watched Afro Cyber Resistance by Sabita Rezer and read Technology and Ethos by Emery Baraka, both in London and Abuja and also in our online sessions. We then moved on to Ancestral Technologies in February, where we had a salon, in-person salon in London and Abuja, where we talked about what ancestral technologies means to us as individuals and tried to come up with a working definition, but also looked at some examples of what ancestral technologies are or could be. And this ended with a virtual panel, much like the one today, with three artists, specifically the Ezek twins, Banji Chona, and Zoe Chinonso, who is the founder of African Design Canon. Then in March, we moved on to the experimental web, where we looked at an alternative history of the internet and how artists in particular are really reclaiming the internet as a medium and as a space for connection. We had a creative coding workshop online and a study group in person where we read On Digital Gardens by Annika Hassine Izora. And then moving on to Futuring Towards Freedom, our last theme for this cycle. And just to recap briefly, I'm sure we'll get more into futures today, but to recap briefly on what we talked about and looked at in the in-person sessions. So we were exploring futuring and forecasting as a practice that we can use to imagine more hopeful technological futures. And if you're not too familiar with what that means, just to give you some background, so futures thinking is an inherent survival skill and has been practiced for as long as time itself. You know, if you think of, for example, farming and letting land rest to ensure long-term sustainability, to resource allocation, to, for example, something we do in Ghana, not unique to Ghana, but quite common in other traditional architectures, is building compound homes, because you're thinking about future generations and how your children or grandchildren may also live in that same unit with you. And this is an example of futures thinking. But as a social science field or formalized research practice, forecasting has its roots in science and academia and is a systematic, interdisciplinary, and holistic study of social and technological advancement and other environmental trends, often for the purpose of exploring how people will live and work in the future. So 2 weeks ago in the London in-person session, we read a few rules for predicting the future by Octavia Butler, which is online. It's also in the resource list, which I believe everybody who registered received in the email, which had the Zoom link. If not, you can also find it on our website or email us and we can send it to you directly. So we read that essay and then we had a forecasting workshop where we learned some basic elements of forecasting, and try to use that to imagine a few scenarios in 2030 and how tech might be used and what kind of technology might be developed. But to bring this to today, I feel like the three people who we're going to be hearing from really do speak to what futures looks like in an artistic context and how you can use speculation as a practice within art. And so I'll introduce them briefly, beginning with Natalie Paneng. So Natalie is a Johannesburg-based transmedia artist and digital world builder, crafting surreal narratives through installation, performance, and creative technology. A BA honors graduate in dramatic arts from Wits University, she blends theater and self-taught digital wizardry to explore the role of the alternative Black woman in shifting realities. Her work has shown internationally at venues like Gallery Egan and Art, Stevenson Gallery, Kunsthaus Bremen, and more. She has presented at HKW and festivals including MUTEC Montreal and IDFA, where Natalie's Trifecta won the 2023 Special Jury Prize for Creative Technology. A recent resident at Studio Quantum and Gasworks London, she continues to explore the entangled realms of science, art, and spirit. And I feel like even just her background on Zoom right now speaks a bit to this. Moving on to Noah Misan Okwudini. Noah is an interdisciplinary artist, writer, and future synthesist. He believes in the power of community and the potential to dream and co-create desirable futures and participatory realities. His inquiry process employs research, art thinking, and the pedagogical approaches to document conceptualize, and speculate, including work with archives, using formats like photography, sound, performances, and new media. He often works at the intersection of art, science, and technology, viewing this as a site for prototyping and imagining alternative realities. He explores eco-cultural narratives, memory, space-time, and how African culture changes within these shifts. Noah was a part of the inaugural cohort of Dreaming New Worlds by the Goethe Institute with his collective A La Praxis, and he was a recipient of the pilot Starts Africa Residency Grant. He also co-founded Quota Space Time, an initiative creating space for communities to dream and shape participatory realities and alternate futures. And Noah will speak more about this when he presents. And moving on to Adi Melenciano. Adi has cultivated an expansive practice within the arts, technology, design, culture, and pedagogy. Her cultivated ability to combine many disciplines reveals their interconnectedness and reimagines their conventions for new possibilities. Her art practice ranges from using improvisational dance as an ethnomusicological research instrument to exploring AI through both critical and imaginative lenses, to sonic composition using botanical data. She's the founder of Afrotectopia, a social institution that imagines new possibilities at the nexus of art, design, technology, and culture. Currently, Afrotectopia is on a book tour to promote their recently published kitchen table art book titled Black Metal, which came out of an incubator between Afrotectopia, MIT Media's Lab Space Exploration Initiative, and NYU's Interactive Telecommunications Program. And previously, she was a creative technologist at Google's Creative Lab. And so on that note, I will pass to Adi. Please let me know if you have any challenges with sharing screen. I have enabled the rights to do so.
Okay, perfect. All right. Hello. Oh, y'all, it was so special listening to you. Such a full circle moment of you being a part of Afrotectopia and just seeing your work build. It's amazing. So I'm very excited to join everyone. I'm going to very quickly talk a bit about the work that I've been doing over the past few years. And I'm going to start with what Ya mentioned in my bio of Black Metal, which is this book that I've been working alongside many talented artists and designers and institutions in creating a space for us to think about space travel through a very speculative, cultural, spiritual lens. This book came about because I was invited by MIT Media Lab Space Exploration Initiative to join them as a research affiliate. And so usually what I love to do within my career is bring Afrotectopia wherever I can. And so in being invited to this environment, I wanted to invite more people to collaborate with me to research and build on top of MIT's work. And so I brought in a few artists that I've admired from afar for a while, and they explore a variety of different topics within their work, very speculative design, Afrofuturism, spirituality, and we came together for about a year and we're in conversation of thinking of what would we want to create. We had no idea what we were going to create. We kind of went into this very blind. But by the end of it, we decided we wanted to create this chemical that's a symbol and a motif of Black potentiality. So really us placing ourselves outside of the reality of what it means to be Black in today's world and what it has meant to be Black historically, but to think of our possibility and potential in a way that inspires other people to do the same. I'm going to share my chapter, which is called Celestial Florilegia, and that's this section of the book. So each of us, four artists, we have our own section within the book. And my book is all of us built on our lifelong practices. And one of my lifelong practices is the study of plants and botany. I have a very special relationship to plants and their sentience and a respect towards it, especially as we don't recognize how most of us don't recognize how significant they are, especially in the modern world. And so I like to give a voice to them, as Ya mentioned in my bio, of doing a bit of biosonification. So within this exploration called Celestial Florilegia, what I was doing was tying together a variety of different areas of research that I've cultivated for a while, from spirituality. I love to study how groups of people around the world find ways to develop and train and sculpt their consciousness through a variety of different forms of spirituality. I also clearly love plants. And then we were also placing this in an environment of what would it mean if we discovered botanical life in outer space? How might they look? How might they interact with us? And a big part of this chapter is to reorient us to the way that we exist in this world, and to remind us of how limited our understanding of our existence is. Like, one of them that I don't directly say in the book, but I constantly associate with this chapter, is that we often think we only have five senses, sight, hearing, touch, smell, and taste. But there's so many other nodes and access points within our senses and mind and spirit that we are using to navigate the world. And so trying to challenge people to kind of open their mindset. And so this is the first chapter within the book. And so it invites people to kind of like shift the way that they think and really kind of play around with it a bit more. And then the book is also meant to be this spiritual tool where, as you navigate these different plants, I've created this spiritual technique that is built off of very ancestral practices, both in the African and Asian diasporic worlds of, as you find plants that you resonate with most, you can now create this sort of cone, which is typical of Zen Buddhist practices, where it's sort of this North Star guiding message for you. And then this is as clearly it's part of the lineage of Afrotectopia, which I created while I was a graduate student at New York University. And that was almost 7 years ago. So it's had so many different versions. But one very important part of Afrotectopia is community and making sure that it's a stage to uplift a lot of talent. And so this book was more central to a few artists and then kind of radiating and inviting other communities to join this work. And so it's been really important to figure out ways that I can situate this book amongst a variety of different communities and they can see themselves within this work. Sometimes we have design hackathons where they will co-imagine along with us and create additional inventions for Black metals. More often it's a film screening. So I've turned the whole book into a film, especially considering how the book isn't as accessible as what most of the things that have come out of Afrotopia have been. And so it's been really important to figure out how to make sure that people can at least still have access to the content. And so I turned all the pages, most of the pages, but generally the whole book into this film that people could experience. And then with my personal practice, I've also been diving into that a lot more in the past maybe 4 or 5 years. And so this area of work has surrounded my love of dance, which has been very consistent within my work. But I also really love to study how people around the world seem to move their bodies in specific ways according to sound and beat and those sorts of things. So often what I do within my practice is kind of use myself as a germ within a Petri dish. And so I will, since it's hard to have access to a bunch of people and be able to study them in a very traditional, rigorous scientific environment, I'll just study myself. And so what I did was, this was during a residency that I had at University of Maryland, where I had access to their motion capture facility. And I would go in and I would play a whole playlist of music, and then I would just capture myself with mocap, and then study possible correlations between the way that I move and then the music. But I also am very invested in studying how music moves around the diaspora. My family's from the Dominican Republic, which is such a fusion of many countries in West Africa, but then also Western European and also indigenous Caribbean. And so I love to study, and also being Dominican, you really see this different relationship of the drum, where it's an African drum that's central to bachata and merengue, but it becomes different forms. And so I think by noticing those patterns, it made me more aware of how those patterns also exist in a variety of different genres, from samba in Brazil to reggae in the Caribbean to all sorts. And so this is a visual of one kind of experiment that I made, I think last summer, where I started to find correlations between movement and sound and try to visualize that for other people to experience along with me. And it was also part of my research as I built out this larger project, which is being exhibited mostly in New York City. It was screened at MoMA, and it's currently on view at the Bronx Museum of Art. And it's titled Cosmiage. And cosmiage is this word I created that blends the idea of cosmos and lineage. And this has been a theory that I've been building as I've been doing this work. Of when I danced, I started to notice how I was dancing in ways that I wasn't taught, and I didn't grow up necessarily seeing, but it was kind of just coming out of me through the music. And so for me, it made me really think a lot about how memory exists outside of our lived experience. Like we think we only, what is in our body is often something that we actually like physically had contact with. But epigenetics and a lot of other theories would explain that there's so many memories that are embedded inside of our DNA. And so this was me exploring how different senses cultivate and catalyze those sort of memories, and how sound can actually catalyze memory within my body that allows me to do things that I didn't live growing up doing or witnessing directly, but it's part of my DNA. And so, yeah, I've been creating these different visuals and have turned this into a film, currently at a runtime of about 20 minutes, that explores kind of these dreams through the perspective of Thoiso, which is a character within this myth that I've been building and have created. And so there are a bunch of dreams of moments where this dancer, who's really only doing maybe 2 different dances, but applied to the dance, I also scored the film for this. I'm creating a bunch of different sounds that draw and sample from cultures around the diaspora, whether it's Brazilian or Caribbean or African directly, and then created this piece. And then I also am a researcher, and I usually translate a lot of my research into art. And so this is an area that I've been building with generative AI starting from a few years ago called computational anthropology, where I use AI to allow us to understand who we are as a group of people in society and how we exist within the world. And so this was one of the first projects that I created with these tools where I'm very simply uploading a headshot, and then I'll use a word and see how does that word change my headshot based off how we have used that word most dominantly. So really kind of visualizing the stereotypes of what does it mean for a person to drink tea, and how does that, change my face, or to be a programmer, which is the most jarring one for everyone, of how it changes my race and my gender. And so, yeah, this study of language, which has been very important to me as I've been exploring in this area of language, is encoded with so much semantically, historically, geolocation wise, so many things. And it's really revealing itself as we use tools that directly use words as a programming language. And so these are a few. This is another example of me building on this idea of computational anthropology. And I use that term, which is a term that has existed, but I've used it in a way that describes this technique that is using AI, but also just generally computational methods that are dense in data and allow me to study people. And so this one, I used a caption from the public domain, the archive, worldwide archive, and then I would see how well it could recreate that image simply from that caption, see what it retained, like the posture, the hair, the fashion aesthetic, but how it didn't identify that Benjamin Pap Singleton, as in the caption, could potentially be a Black man. So it reveals the limitations of these tools, but also the possibilities. And then this is a final piece that I'll share, which is another very impactful area of research that I've been building. And so I titled this Synthesized Portraitures, in that what I was doing was I created this additional layer on top of the larger AI model and made it towards my likeness. And so I was creating all these images of myself and synthesizing portraits that presented me with all these different identities. And it was a really jarring experience to witness this, and I was doing this also while working amongst other colleagues that were doing similar work. And so we would have conversations about what does it mean to see yourself presented in ways you hadn't presented yourself before, or maybe you have a long time ago. And so it really reminds you of parts of you that you've retained, but also parts of you that you've dismissed. As we are more and more socialized into this world, we often kind of decide, okay, this is appropriate to do, this is not appropriate to do. So it's really important to have those moments where you kind of like really look in a mirror that is questioning you and showing you alternative forms of yourself, so you can become more aware, self-aware of the way that you're existing, and then make a decision, be more intentional about how you're existing and if that aligns with you or not. So, and this also impacted my psyche in ways of creating memories that I had not experienced, and what that means to see myself living in environments and doing things that I had not done, and how that really impacts the psyche. So it was a huge rabbit hole in all these things that I was exploring. But yeah, we can discuss that more in the Q&A, and I'm excited to pass it off to who's next.
Yes, Natalie, that would be you. Let me know if you have any challenges with sharing screen.
Okay, I'm starting to try. Just a second. Before I even share screen, I'm gonna visualize. Can everybody hear me well? Yes, great. Hello everyone. I'm Natalie, and I am gonna do something I've never done, and I'm just gonna try and jump into it. So, I'm joining you from Johannesburg, South Africa right now, and I, like, in preparation, kept on thinking about like what I will speak about and what I'll present. I am a born performance artist who studied and got really bored and started like playing with technology and went down many wormholes, and got quite like enlightened, messed up, exposed, expanded, transported, squished, like the ways that you can go to like different worlds within the internet. I feel like I had like many lives, many deaths, many lives, many deaths. And now, within my practice, like, thank you to you guys at Future Inventions for inviting me. But like, yes, as you had like already spoke about my bio, like I think there's a lot of technical elements to being an artist, and there's a lot of ways that I can speak about my technicalities right now as an artist. But in all honesty, I'm quite disconnected from that. And that's prompted me to ask why. And that I've been reading a lot of texts. So, what I'm going to do in this 15 minutes, instead of explaining and showing you who I am, I'm going to try really hard to be an embodiment of what my work attempts to do online. And through bringing myself online for years, I've always used the internet to bring the alternative to the fold and like play with the algorithms and feed the algorithms. I think like Nima, Take Back the Internet says like healing algorithms or like bringing new things into the algorithm that bring light, bring healing, bring joy. And so a lot of it in the start was me presenting myself as this character in these outer worlds and very far from earth, very far from grounding, very far from being here. And I think I've been gone for so long, and it made me think how many more of us have been gone for super long. And I just thought, like, let me embody what my work intends to do, which is cleanse the internet, which is give life on the internet, which is give light on the internet, which is like to still go through the knowledge and learn and to distill it and share it in softer, maternal ways because there's not enough of us doing it anymore. And so we're being fed a lot constantly. And something needs to happen, like light needs to be brought, cleaners and energy, new air. So yeah, I'm about to read you some text. I'm going to play a video that I'll play the video because I would like us to teleport first together, but I'll read some texts, give a prompt, play the video, and hope that through the video and through the prompt, you understand that like we're going to that place. And I just want to see if it's possible to, instead of be productive, instead of like work with the machine, like work with the raw elements that made the machine. And that's something I'm also as a digital artist trying to remind myself that like all digital elements come from nature. So I can engage both of them. And if I can tap into my phone, how do I tap into the stone? So I'm gonna try something. I feel very woo-woo right now. I am not a practitioner in anything. I'm just an internet girly who has been healed by the worlds, the websites, the songs, the imagery online. And I would love to just share and take a moment of breath, of slowness, of tapping in. I would ask whoever is willing and open to join me to truly like try surrender so we can see essentially why ancestral power itself was so important and how powerful digital power itself is. Not in a culty, crazy way, just in a way of seeing if we can feel each other from where we are because we're connected. Like how, you know, so I think it's all about the tapping in. So yeah, I'm just gonna start and I'm gonna go through a few texts of books that I'm currently reading. I'm going to start this with the book that got me in this wormhole in the first place. And this is The Healing Wisdom of Africa by Malidoma Pachisome. And they speak a lot about indigenous technology and about the plants and they actually, like I think in South Africa we have a writer called Credit Mutua, and Malioma Pechisome is from Burkina Faso. And this book was written in, I think, the 1970s, if I'm not mistaken. But in South Africa, we have a shaman. His name was Kreda Muta, and he was also super digital. And he also didn't see the disconnect between how technology was infiltrating and is infiltrating. And he was going crazy seeing us all use technology to talk about technology, but not use the power of it. And like I said, like I want to be an embodiment and not only someone who talks about it and shows it through her work, but actually someone who attempts, who will fail, who will be vulnerable, and who will do it for real, who will attempt to reach these worlds for real, because I'm real, you are real. The elements that make these technologies, the Wi-Fi, the computer, the lights, like all of these things are around and within us, and within the technology. Okay, so just this small cute part where Mr. Some speaks about indigenous technology. He says, indigenous technology is best approached from the context of spiritual perception. For when we see with spiritual eyes, we remain in service to nature. We see nature as the originator of our tools. And we know that our tools or our technology must be used in harmony with nature's designs and purposes, which are to maintain and to serve the individual and community. Indigenous people approach technology with a mind that is not antagonistic to the whole of things, to communion between no? Indigenous people approach technology with a mind that is not antagonistic to the whole of things, to communion between natural and spiritual. Also, they want to make sure that the individual's work is contributing not only to the individual, but also to the collective or the community. And so I think that's what I feel. I started feeling paralyzed by the space that is the teleportation device, right? And so it made me think like, what's wrong? What's missing? What's broken? What needs to be realigned? And when I started thinking about that, I was thinking about myself, like, am I doing it for myself? Because if it's for myself, there's quicker ways to do it. But if it's for my art practice, if I'm using the digital, like, how can I wield these tools? How can I make them into a healing tool versus just a communication tool? How can I change the idea of communication? How can we change the ways of hearing? How can we change the ways of feeling? How can we change the ways of connecting? Do we feel something as someone presents and is vulnerable? Do we see it as a performance? Can we relate? Can we be vulnerable in listening? Can we take all of these elements into our being as we do this? And then I'm going to quickly read basically like a composition and a game and prompt that is in this book, Quantum Listening, written by Pauline Olevenos. And this was a composer and physicist who was looking at like the possibilities and the ways in which I guess like listening is a way to engage and feel what is quantum, which is something way bigger that we don't need to go into right now. But I'm gonna read the points. There's 20 points. Not all of them make sense because in this book, they did these exercises around the world and online, where they were connecting with people and trying to listen to everything around them. And so this is the first prompt I would like to give you. As you listen to me, listen to everything where you are. And invite every single sound where you are into the space of healing with us. Invite the ground that you're sitting on meters and meters and meters and meters away, invited into this light and this healing. So I'm going to read out these 20 points and we're going to adjust it to a different vibe. After I read these 20 points, I'm going to play a video. As we're playing the video, some people can watch the video and some people can try tap in for the 4 minutes of the video with me. The tapping in is described within these 20 prompts. And I would love for everybody to kind of think about it in a way that is relevant to our setup, which is online, we're not together. So in this context, it's about a bunch of musicians sitting in a circle and they all have their instruments, but we're going to do it differently. And yeah, we do have our instruments, we have ourselves, we have our gifts, we have our being, we have our ways of operating, we have our quirks, we have our short keys, and the ways that we need to see ourselves integrating our like magical presence is within the ways we operate technology too, you know? It's sometimes so interesting to hear people say, oh, I'm so great at this, but I can't do anything on technology. But then they do some weird, interesting things specifically on technology because of their limitation. And so I think like, I'm not into how much I've learned anymore with technology. I'm kind of trying to use it to speak to me with nature, with the texts, with the elders who've already written this, and to find the real communities, the real spaces to be this vulnerable and goofy, oh my gosh, and share myself and try hold international, worldwide web space. So I'm gonna go into it. The title of the prompt is called Compassion, and I'm just going to read it. I'm going to try be really clear, and I hope that all 20 points sit with us. But basically, we're starting the meditation. So if you are joining, I ask you to take a deep breath with me. And the breath is moving from your chest and expanding your stomach. And then out. Compassion, inspired by the sonic meditations of Pauline Oliveros. 1, all musicians, so I guess we are the musicians, should sit in a circle facing one another. Not in a circle, we're just looking at our computers, we're just where we are. Close your eyes. Imagine a cord that leads from the base of your spine all the way to the center of the earth. Take a deep breath. And as you release the breath, follow the cord all the way down. Imagine its color, shape, and pathway. Hum or sing the sound of this journey to the center of the earth. Hold your tone until everyone is singing or humming their own unique tone. When everyone is firmly connected, send a tone swirling clockwise around the circle. Anyone can start. Now, how I see this is everybody just sending energy directly down and through the screen and back to themselves. So ultimately, you won't feel the energy outside of yourself. It's within yourself. So it talks about matching the sound, but instead of matching the sound, I would like everyone to try and match the frequency, the feeling, the attempts, the imagination of everybody else connecting with them. Match the sound of the person to your left, then change it, then match it again. Have fun. Essentially, there are many rhythms, many melodies, many vibes that you are basically trying to tap on digitally and IRL. When you are all ready, send a tone of peace to all the beings in the building. So wherever you are, whichever building you are, whichever context you're in, all of our contexts need digital and like literal live cleansing and healing and peace and beauty and joy. So if you can also like take strength and call that into yourself, and breathe that out within, and imagine yourself also like as this tap root going further and further into the earth. Also imagine yourself as the cords, the root system, like a tree, the rhizome system, the neural pathways. So like it keeps sinking deeper and deeper and deeper into yourself and into the world and into your chair and into your setting and into your context and into your being, and most importantly, into your being. Like, notice if you feel any other way from how you felt when you started, if you're holding your breath, if you're holding your jaw, if your arms are not, your shoulders are not sitting back and your jaw is not open. Now, extend the tone of peace to the rest of the building. Then expand the circle to your city. And then outwards to your country. Next to your continent. And finally to the planet. So I'm just imagining that this energy is like really potent right now. And it's just going and going and going and going and going like a huge bubble. No. No. I'm gonna play a video now. And as I play this video, I asked that everybody basically do the expansion, do the tap rooting, do the connecting, and try sink deeper into each other. Or try meet me in this space and this portal that I'm presenting here. So you can either tap into yourself and the sounds around you, tap into the sounds of this video, tap into the sounds of what I'll be making here, IRL. And this is just a 4-minute meditation. I have no control over anyone from where I am and genuinely have pure intentions. So I hope that at least 3 or 2 people will dive into this abyss with me.
Natalie, just to let you know, there's a gray box on the screen.
Oh, on the thing? Let me see. I think it's the Zoom thing. Is this gone?
Yes, it's
Is it
gone.
gone now?
Yeah.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Is it gone?
Yes.
Okay, great. Hey, and now I'm back. I don't want to go over time, so um, if you don't mind, just one last breath with me. Um, and thank you. Thank you for being blocks on the screen. And behind the blocks on the screen, thank you for being people, embodiments of yourself, curious people, curious beings, searchers, seers, carers, and it's a reminder that this work can happen as we theorize. This work can happen as we develop. This work can happen as we get technically strong. But this is also the work that is collectively, like, I think, truly awakening within all of us. I find it very funny that the Sankofa, the cowrie shell, um, plants, minerals. These things have been here for years, but it's interesting how the collective consciousness brings more. Like we're all tapped in. Like, why at Future Inventions are you guys looking at the cowrie shell? Why is everybody looking at the cowrie shell? Why are we making replicas of it digitally in VR? Making people go into cowrie shells that lead them into portals, into like we're speaking about something. And I would love for us to, for some moment, not make ourselves feel crazy and engage the plants for their value, engage the water for its knowledge and holding the internet, engage the rocks for the minerals that hold, and create our devices. So caring for those and caring for our devices as an extension, the things that we share and transmute through the lines of the internet, all of these things, if engaged with intention, I just imagine that they could be a lot more powerful. So just, yeah, one more breath and then I'm gonna disappear off screen. Thank you so much for jumping into this portal with me and sinking super deep into the center of the earth, sharing compassion, love, and peace via the internet, via your soul, via this amazing intervention. So one breath in. And you can feel it going up your nose. In Joburg, it's a little cold, so the air's a bit cold, and I can feel it slowly going down and expanding into my tummy. And I actually want to feel my tummy, feel the weight. If you can touch and hold your stomach, and you can feel the compression and the pushing. And in 3 seconds, breathe all of that out. Come from the base of the earth back to the base of the chair or whatever thing you're sitting on. So 1, 2,
Thank you so, so much for that lovely demonstration of your practice, Natalie. Also just grounding us in, being online. I know a lot of us probably jumped on either during lunch break or if you're in the UK, Africa side, end of the day. So nice to be brought back and be present. On that note, I will pass over to Noah, who is our last sort of guest speaker before we ask some questions. And a reminder to everybody about making note of any questions that you have while the presentations are happening.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Oh, hi. Thank you so much, Natalie, for that. I needed that. So I feel really calm now. And also thank you, Ari. Thank you guys for having me. Natalie and Ari are two people I really admire their work. So it's really amazing to be here right now, speaking on the same panel with them. Yeah, so my name is Noah Misan Okwudini. I'm an artist living and working in Lagos, Nigeria, but I'm from a place called Warri, somewhere in the southern parts of Nigeria. And so technology evades me. I'm thinking about how to share my slides. Yeah, okay. So I had to find like the goofiest picture of me, which is me wearing this helmet. I created this using found objects. I found this on the shoreline somewhere at the beach in Mississani, Dar es Salaam. And yes, my name is Noah. I'm an artist, writer, and future synthesist. Um, yeah, I like to start with the present. And I know like a lot of our conversations involve thinking about the future. But also I think the present is also like the most important part of thinking about the future. And so what if the present is the only future we will ever know? And I ask that because we live in a sort of um embedded system. We live embedded in systems where economic, social, colonial and post-colonial that teach us to map our lives as a series of points on a relentless forward marching timeline as the ticking clock of progress goes. And there's a sort of demand for constant growth, constant improvement. There's a promise of a better tomorrow. And we all direct our gaze towards a future, a sort of not yet that we believe we can predict, manage, and control. And through this lens, I'm also thinking about it from how the outside perceives Africa or people of African descent. Our futures are sort of pre-programmed. So we sort of have to like break out of that narrative and break out of the idea of linear time and sort of feel this present, this moment we're living in right now, and sort of see that as a portal into the future. And in this sort of time thinking where time is linear, past, present, future, the present is sort of like a waiting room, a sort of temporary inconvenience, and also something we see as something we have to endure before we reach the real future. So, but what if this present is the only future we will ever know? How do we, go about thinking about that? And I'm also thinking about it from through the lens of Rashida Phillips of Black Quantum Futurism. Rashida said, we are reprogrammed without language, without time, without agency, and our own technology. So like everything, our modes of time thinking, our ancestral modes of time thinking has been sort of stripped off away from us, and we're left in this linear experience of time. And this experience of time is sort of like strange to us because our ancestors saw time different. Time was more experiential for them. It was more, I dare say, like it was more emotional because time was tied to events as they happened, as opposed to like mathematical or numerical precision. For our ancestors, it was more like if I say I'm meeting you at sunrise, it means I'm meeting you at that stretch of time that is sunrise. It doesn't mean I'm going to be meeting you by 6 a.m. or 7 a.m. I'm meeting you at sunrise. So I'm meeting you at sunrise. If it stretches past 3 hours, then yeah, I guess you have to wait. So I think African time is real. Um, yeah, and for ancestors, time was more event-based, emotional, and relational. So it was more market days, it was more attuned to the moon, to events that happen, to death, to birth, to harvest time, as events happen. And this sort of time thinking we're currently in is, pulling us away from that. And yeah, and one of the concepts of time that I love to think about in this sort of temporal collapse is the concept of Sasa and Zamani. And Sasa and Zamani is as espoused by the Swahili philosopher John Mbiti. Um, in Swahili time thinking, time is not a straight line of past, present, future. It's also not a sequence of events unfolding, in a direct path, speeding off towards the future, as we see in most sci-fi movies or most narratives. But in Swahili time, time is in two dimensions. The concept of time is in two dimensions. There's Sasa, which is the present, it represents like present time, the recent past, and the near future, and it moves backwards into Zamani as events occur. I also think this is something that's also sort of linked to the idea of Sankofa, which, means to look back, to go forward. So I feel like our ancestors sort of had across different geographical regions, they sort of had the same form of time thinking, thinking to look backwards, to think backwards, to move backwards, as opposed to just, hurtling towards like a future that we don't know. It's sort of not yet that we're hurrying towards. And yeah, so Sasa represents the present time, the recent past and the near future. And Zamani, on the other hand, is the graveyard of time. It's the repository of all realities. It's the endless past that stretches back into lived prehistoric and mythological times. And in a sense, Zamani also encompasses an implicit futurity that we might also refer as the future past. So in this time thinking, it didn't mean that the ancestors didn't think about the future in that manner. It just wasn't as it just wasn't in the form of like speed. We're speeding towards a particular future. They're actually like moving towards it as experiences happen. So Sasa moves backwards into Zamani as events materialize. And I think as opposed to like the straight line, it's a sort of ellipse where Sasa is in the middle and Zamani engulfs Sasa. And Zamani sort of informs the events that happen in Sasa. And your Sasa is not only yours, your Sasa is also for your community because the community also has a Sasa. The community also has a present that is linked to yours. So it was more communal time. It was more, it's not the sort of individualistic time thinking that we currently have. And as Mbiti put it, Sasa is the period of immediate concern for the people, since that is where or when they exist. What will be future is extremely brief. Yeah, and this sort of thinking about the present and thinking about the future in this relation, in my practice as a future synthesis, as an artist, as an individual living in this current capitalist time, hate to repeat it, it's something that keeps me grounded. Like I try to stay grounded in the present when I'm thinking about ideas, when I'm, not just thinking about ideas, when I'm being sort of used as a conduit for these ideas, when I'm being used to bring them into this reality. It's more grounded in the present, even when I'm speculating, even when I'm, way off. So this brings me to this project, which is very dear to my heart. It's Umale Okere, a juxtaposition of two presents. So the Umale are deities from Ishekiri cosmology, and the Ishekiri are a tribe from the southern part of Nigeria and very, very tied to my heritage. And the Umale Okere are deities from the Awankere festival. And this festival has been ongoing since the year 1497, if we're thinking about it linearly. And that was when the first Olu of Wari, who was also the son of the Oba of Benin, left Benin to go find his own kingdom. And he got chased by this warrior called Ekpen. Ekpen means the leopard. So Ekpen chased Ginua to the place we currently call Wari, where I'm from. And they sort of had like an exchange, fight, battles, and all of that. And when he saw that his forces were becoming smaller, he decided to like roll peace and he couldn't go back to Benin. So, but he brought this festival with him and he named the place Okere. And Okere means it's becoming smaller. So I guess because his forces were becoming smaller, so he named the place Okere. I think that's too much information. But yeah, the Umalakere are deities. They're riverine deities who come out once every year during this festival. And the festival is a sort of fertility and cleansing festival. And people used to come around during the time of this festival. They come around from outside, from wherever they were, from different countries just to celebrate this. And since it's been ongoing for, over 500 years, my grandma saw this festival, my mom did, and most likely my grandma's grandma saw this festival. So I've been wondering, at the amount of change that has gone on, in weather conditions, in the sort of material they used before now, and how it's going to be, moving on into this future we are currently creating. And this narrative is told with photography and AI assisted imagery. So the photography is what you can see on the left. And I moved this into two narratives, one which I call the impossible present. And it's something I drew from the book, the anthology Arts of Living on a Damaged Planet. So the impossible present is the current present that we live in, where there's a sea level rise, where the climate's changing, where we're building, creating new technologies faster than we know what to do with them, And the second timeline is what I call the improbable present. It's speculative, and it imagines a future where the Umale Okere and also the Ishekiri people of this particular time, which is set in the year 2297, where they have adapted, and the festival is no longer on land, but they've moved underwater due to the people actually doing some DIY bio enhancements on themselves to actually thrive permanently underwater. So the festival, the people, and everything have moved underwater. But I'm just trying to frame the Umale in this story because I want us to think about what would happen to our cultural heritage if we don't, take care of it, if we don't think about these things in the present, what would happen? We know the sea level, this rising sea level. We know the climate is changing. We know there's global warming. We know there's war in so many places, but we're just watching all of these things in real time without doing anything, but always hurrying towards the future, new technologies that we don't know what will happen when we create them, when we make them. And I don't know, for me, it's just grounding in the present as opposed to thinking about it in the future. That's why I said it's a juxtaposition of two presents, This present is currently happening right now. The present where the Umale are underwater, where the people are underwater, is currently happening. And we don't have to wait before we think about, how we can solve these challenges. And in this present, not future, in this present, the Umale you can see on the right side, they've become the canes they're holding have become light and sonar devices. So they now communicate through light and sonar as opposed to like the sound of the upper world. And it's not gloomy, even though it looks gloomy somewhat. It's a future where the people, the buildings you can see behind, the structures you can see behind rather, have become sort of merged with the water. It's growing from the water in this particular present. So I just wanted to frame it there for us to think about what it means to live in a present that's different from ours, as opposed to thinking about it as a future. Also in this same thinking of thinking about the present, I'm moving on to this project. It's an ongoing project called The Grio's Helmet. And The Grio's Helmet is a speculative narrative that follows a griot named Joel Nyama, a memory keeper who travels across timelines using a mnemonic helmet. She moves through mythic eras and alternate futures, gathering memories scattered across space-time, retelling, reweaving, remembering. But during one of her journeys, Joel arrives at a point in time called Sasa, same present. In this timeline, the world is dominated by a powerful techno entity known as Memoria Corp, which is meant to extract, digitize, and commodify human memory. Under this regime, remembering has become a resource and forgetting has become a policy. And in this world, this world happens after a sort of quantum revolution in the present. And that's me just trying to get us to think about you know, we're so much bothered about the current AI revolution, wish we didn't, you know, fix our policies right before we created these technologies. I mean, these technologies have been ongoing for a long point in time, but we've not fixed like the ethics, the ethical parts of these things. We just keep hurrying towards creating, towards making, without being slow about how we're thinking about these things. So the next revolution may be the quantum revolution. So what's going to happen when, you know, quantum technology and whatnot breaks the internet? What's going to happen? Is that when we start thinking about the emergency that's about to happen? You know, so following the quantum revolution, a collapse in space-time has made SASA unstable. So SASA is thick with interference caused by these new technologies being created. The noise disrupts Joe's helmet. Its memory matrix begins to decohere. And that's because in the helmet she's carrying, it's a sort of device that holds these memories in an entangled, should I say, container, an entangled format. And decoherence is something that happens when noise, environmental noise, enters into like a quantum system, and then it begins to leak into the environment. So in this present, in Sasa, Jewel is trapped and she's unable to move forward or backwards. So it's an ongoing narrative that I'm writing, and basically the images you can see are me making storyboards of what I think, just storyboards. These are not like the final version of the images, but just a storyboard of what I think it could be. So it's currently being developed into a sort of game, and I'm currently writing about it. And next, I'm gonna talk about quarter space-time. Yeah. So quarter space-time is something really, really dear to my heart, and me and my friends and colleagues, we've been working on this for a while now. And the first edition of this happened on the shoreline of a place called Oreta in Ikorodu. It's really close to where I live in Lagos. And in Ikorodu, it's really crazy because every time I need to attend an art event, a workshop, or, you know, go somewhere where conversations about the future, the present, where conversations about making this world is happening, I have to go far, far away. And you can actually see the island. This is somewhere around Lagos Island. You can actually see it from across the water. So it's a sort of different area from here. And the people, the kids you can see here are part of a displaced community. They got displaced from somewhere around here because the government needed to, you know, build, gentrify the environment they were living in. So they become sort of stuck in this temporary place because this place is temporary. And just right outside the corner, right outside the photo, there's like sand mining ongoing. So if that's happening, it means where they are currently is in the present, is currently facing a sort of, I don't know, distortion in the land, and something is going to happen soon. But they are most likely oblivious to it because everybody thinks, you know, sand mining is a regular thing that should happen. Yeah, away from that narrative, is quarter means to dream. It's the Swahili word for dreaming. And, you know, space times is us just thinking about African modes of thinking, African modes of time thinking, space thinking. It's us thinking about like building participatory realities and worlds, as opposed to having other people have the final say. It's bringing the future to the people, because the people need to also have a say in how these futures are being made, these futures are being created. And it's us thinking about designing from the margins by meeting the people at their points, like getting them to think about, okay, what do you want to see in the next 10 years? What do you want to see next year? You know, because if we keep talking about the future, 50 years, 100 years, it's really, really hard to grasp what's going to happen in the next 5 years. Because in the next 1 or 2 years, this place may not exist. And I've been documenting this community since 2023, and a lot of changes have been happening so far. Like, so this is where we did the first quarter event. And with quarter, we are engaging people with future making, basically, through art thinking, through alternative cinema, getting people to create functional prototypes, or just through experimental experiences. And this was where the first quarter event held. and we used the community church as our cinema. And for the first time, these kids got to see Afrofuturism. It was just a an opener into this, and we showed them Afronauts by Notama Bodomo, and played music from Sun Ra, Adol of all this Afrofuturist media just showing and playing this in this church somewhere right next to the shoreline, getting them to think about the future and to think about dream. And that day I asked a question, like, what do you dream about? And one of the kids told me, she said, um, how can I dream when I don't even sleep well? I didn't answer the question. Like I couldn't say anything because yeah, how can you dream when you don't even sleep well? So yeah, and also we've also been creating you know, experimental experiences. As you can see on the left screen is us using the motion tracker. That's an Xbox Kinect to track the motions of people just moving around. This is somewhere in Lagos Island called Boar Street. We had a sort of residency, a month-long residency there to engage with the people. So we're showing films on the screens, as you can see here. And there was also like an interactive experience to get people to slow down, to just make use of the space as opposed to rushing, because in Lagos we are always rushing, always. So yeah, this is also like extras from Quarter. We also do like more interactive or experimental experiences. On this side, we're having a sort of sound walk, just going around the environment, listening to the environment as a form of fusion, because what would this environment sound like in the next 50, 100 years? What if this places change into like where there's electrical vehicles? How would it sound like? You know, all of that, just having conversations about the future in a sort of participatory format with the people who matter, with the people whose future we're trying to create together. Because I'm part of the people, so there's no sense in removing myself from the narrative as opposed to being part of it. Yeah. To dream. Thank you.
To dream. Thank you. Right on time. Thank you so much, Noah. Yeah, do you want to say anything or should I jump in?
You can jump right.
Okay, whoa, man. Yeah, thank you for that. Thank you to everyone, to Adi, to Natalie, and to Noah. So Adi has to leave at 8, so I'm quickly going to, this round is for asking questions to all the panelists, but I'll just start with her since she has to leave, and then we'll come back and ask questions and open it to the audience as well. But yes, thank you for your presentation, Adi. Very, yeah, the work is powerful. And I feel like it kicked us off very beautifully. A core part of your futures work, some of the stuff you showed us from Afrotectopia to black metal is speculative, but at the same time is also very grounded in the present and in rigorous in science, like in a rigorous scientific basis. But it also draws an ancestral memory to propose new theories of being and worlding. And I'm very curious about that balance between the ancestral and the future. So why isn't it important for you to consult the past in a practice that is so technology driven and interested in the future?
Yeah. I mean, for one, I just want to thank this space. This was amazing. This was so inspiring. So I'm so happy to be in conversation. And I think your question speaks to a little bit of what we're all doing. Like each of us as panelists, I think what everyone in this Zoom room and what each of us artists have recognized very early on is our cultures are so significant. Like the people that came before us were doing something so incredible. And so it's important for us to consistently honor what they're doing because we have lost so much of that through modernity and becoming more Western. And I never like to villainize or say that anyone is doing anything necessarily wrong. I think that's a very dangerous flattening of a group of people, but I do think what we are doing is very intentionally uplifting what we know best within our own culture, and also questioning the idea of knowing. Knowing is not necessarily only something that you're reading through books or studying in universities, but knowing can be something very spiritual, internal. You didn't maybe hear anyone say it, but somehow it's coming out of you. So yeah, I recognize that within all of our work. And I think with me specifically, it's recognizing how history continuously repeats itself, but just in different forms. Like human nature is a pretty set protocol. It is very fluid and it changes all the time, but the way that we exist as humans, the way that sentience operates, like that energy, all of that, it's very cyclical. Um, but there are tendencies that you can continuously identify and bring into futures. And so I think also I'm very invested in studying the past and understanding what we have done before, what was successful about it, what was not successful about it, and then continuing to use that as an influence as I design features and not just trying to create from scratch. So yeah, I think it's a lot of paying attention, honoring the past, and understanding that really the past becomes the future. And it can become a very intentional and beautiful and well-designed future if you really take time to study what has happened before you.
Yes, I agree, and I think it's interesting that you highlight that all panelists. I feel like at the core of all your work is that sensibility is very strong. Real quick, I just want to add like a part B to the question, which is something I'm personally curious about. I think some others would be as well, but I find it interesting that you're engaging with the past, but the tools you're using are very in the now. So beyond the method, also the tools, you do a lot of work with AI and with VR. And I'm curious to know what that's, using these modern tools, but taking for lack of a better way of saying it, an ancestral lens to playing with them. Like, what has that opened up for you in your work and in your understanding of these tools and technology as a whole?
Yeah, great question. I think, yeah, for one, it's important to ground them as tools, but I think the way that I'm using them, I don't think it's in anything necessarily new. It's more of synthesizing ways that we have inquired about the world and just using what I have access to in the moment. So like with AI, it's technically a modern tool, but I think the thinking that I'm using to guide it is a pretty it's pervasive across time. All I'm doing is asking questions, and I'm noticing what I notice about behavior in society and seeing if it agrees with me or not, or seeing if it's as good as maybe it's kind of like reimagining what a camera could be. A camera has traditionally been a moment in time, you take a picture, but instead what I'm doing is saying, okay, now I actually have a camera that's taken every picture that the Western world knows of. And now I'm kind of trying to pull pictures out of that camera, not necessarily being the photographer, but I'm more of being the researcher that's pulling out of that database. So I think the tools are technically modern, but it's the way that you use them. And for me, of being someone who has studied so many different cultures of so many different time periods, it's a synthesis of all of that. And so it moves beyond the tool. It's more of like, how can I create a thinking that allows me to challenge it? And even with dancing, I think dancing is also something very culturally significant, ancestrally significant. And I'm using these quote unquote modern tools, but it's really a way for me to augment the human experience and to find different ways to kind of highlight the correlations between our movement and dance. But humans have probably always noticed something. We don't have something so dense like a computational model or technology that's rooted in kind of a digital infrastructure that lets us study it in the way that I am. So I think really what I'm doing is kind of just compounding human capability through technology, which is so dense and allows me to explore something at such a granular level, but also just such a wider spectrum, but continuing the human practice.
Mm, thank you. We have one more question in the chat uh, for you. So
Yeah.
the question, okay, yeah, go for it.
I'll read it. Yeah. Araba, I hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly. It says, how do you cultivate your skills with these emerging technologies? Are there any particular platforms or ways of working that you'd recommend for beginners in AI? I think for me, I didn't necessarily For one, I have been a lifelong curious person and a lifelong artist. I've always been creating with anything that's around me. And I've also enjoyed technology since a kid, but it wasn't necessarily that I was a computer scientist or engineer. I was more of just very interested in its design and its capability. So I think for me, when I say cultivate, it's continuously giving yourself the permission to follow your own curiosity. And that's what I've allowed myself to do since a very early age. And I think that's very important to just listen to yourself, listen to your body, listen to your spirit, listen to your mind. What is it? What's peeking out? What are your inklings? What's kind of like sticking out to you and continuously follow it. And I think that is something that's allowed me to have a career that feels very aligned to me as a person. It's really become something that is more than I could have expected, but it's just combining all of my interests together and figuring out how to sustain myself with all of it. So I would say cultivating your skills, it wasn't necessarily about I'm not thinking about how can I use emerging technologies. It's more of what am I just generally interested in? And it happens to be emerging technologies and art and all these things. In particular platforms I would recommend for beginners with AI. I would say explore widely, and there are also different tools that can do different things. Like with ChatGPT, that is probably the most popular AI tool right now, but I think it's all about, again, how you use these tools. So really just get in, play around with it, see how it responds to you. Like I think you really have to kind of build your own relationship to these. No one can really tell you how to use them. It's really how do you want to use them. And then there are other image generating, video generating tools like Runway ML, or a lot of other ones are popping up. I don't really do too much image generation right now, at least with the book and turning that into a film for Afrotectopia. I used Runway mostly of image to video. But I've also taught a class on creative experiments with AI when I did my residency at University of Maryland. And so there, myself and the students, we were exploring so many very emerging early on AI tools, from text to 3D, text to sound, text to all sorts of things. So I think really just kind of like Google searching AI tool that does text to this, text to that, and like really get experimental and search widely, because you might find something that really aligns with you. And JT, has this question for me?
Yes,
Yes, okay.
For any other-
you have the time.
Okay. JT, JTS, how did you learn to remain faithful to that curiosity rather than externally driven, directed forces that won't understand the world you're merging? Um, I think you have to work extremely hard. Like there's no shortcuts when it comes to this. I think I've been able to create a career that stays very aligned with who I am, because I built an infrastructure that doesn't make me reliant on any one thing. So there's no single source of income, there's no single source of influence. I'm spread very widely so that I can build a very strong infrastructure that allows me to be very flexible. And I create containers around my lifestyle so that I can give myself that. But it requires a lot of sacrifice and a lot of trade-offs. Like there are a lot of things that I don't give myself the time, space to do, because I'm very invested in creating a very safe infrastructure for myself to explore widely. And I think it's consistency, and you just keep going at what you're interested in. A lot of times, the things that you may create, people aren't going to catch on. They're not going to understand what you're doing. But I think you have to have this very strong inner knowing and belief in what you're doing, to the point where you take it very seriously and you document it and you archive it and you speak about it. You create worlds around it. You invite other people to explore it with you. You turn it into classrooms. Like you really have to trust yourself so deeply in the things that you're doing that you continue to do it, even if it feels like no one's listening, but you're not doing it because you want people to listen. You're doing it because you're so invested in it. So a combination of all of that. And I wish I could be in discussion with the rest of you, but I do have to leave at the time we said we would wrap up. So hopefully you all can message me and ask questions and I can get back to you.
Thank you so much, Ari. Thank you for your time. Thank you for consistently inspiring us. Thank you for coming.
Take care.
All right. To the other two panelists, everyone, yeah, feel free to keep popping questions in the chat if they come up for you. But yes, both your presentations were very full, very rich, and I appreciated them because I could feel you in them. We know why we reached out to you to present, but I feel like this even exceeded what we were expecting. So yeah, thank you for just bringing yourselves into it. I'll start with Natalie. Um, your presentation really spoke to this question that I'm about to ask. Almost like you knew, but
Almost like
your
you knew.
well, we're in sync. So your work is very personal, clearly, and you are your own muse. The worlds you build are constructed from your own lived experiences. And while you're representing a lot of people in the chat, I saw we're speaking about world building and the richness of the worlds that you build. So how important do you think it is for people to look inwards and use their own dreams, their own histories and whims as materials to build the worlds that they wish to inhabit?
Yeah. Thank you for having me. And I think I can only speak from my context, and it's so weird, like having this shifting practice, I guess, because at one point my practice, I feel like, was concerned more about like using myself as a tool. So if I wanted to create a world or an environment and I wanted characters to embody that environment, I'd put myself in front of the green screen and shoot and basically populate environments that don't exist. And so I personalize them with my own physicality. But then I guess I started like, I don't see myself necessarily as a muse, but more as like a medium, a material, like the same way, the same way I use the technology. So it's like I have to use myself and parts of myself. I have to use certain functions, certain ways of thinking and navigating the same way I use technology. And so I feel like engaging with these two things balances that out. And I guess the second part of your question, which when you spoke about, I guess that like speaking about like transcending reality or why that's important. Is that what you asked, Isabel? Yeah, so I think, yeah.
Yeah, go ahead.
No, sorry, I would love to ask, like, I would love to hear more of the question.
Yeah, so transcending reality, so I'll read the second part again. Looking inwards, essentially, and using your dreams, using your own, just like yourself, in that work of transcending reality and creating the world you want to see. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. I think so. I usually use my dreams because that's like the most natural transcendence that I experience. And then I use the digital essentially to replicate, to recreate, and to share. And so it's I feel like there's a need to tap into one sense of reality, which is just like my physical body, my experiences, the heightened experiences, the dreams, and not necessarily, because I think also this play with like the esoteric is interesting because it's not necessarily transcendence, but it's actually engagement, articulation of what's already there. Like phones and all this digitality is already extremely magical, already extremely compounded, already extremely advanced. And so I think we like to talk about it very far, and we talk about ourselves even, like we understand ourselves, and like I think I'm at the point where I'm like, I'm gonna stop just using things and really try crack my brain at like understanding them. And so that has filtered into how I exist. So I need to understand my true real lived reality and my devices and my articulations digitally. And then I sleep and I'm a human and I have dreams and I don't understand them. And it's maybe what looks like an elder, but she's speaking my language and I don't know it. And then I have to try go on the internet and then so I think the transcendence in itself is life and the internet and dreams. And I think Dini spoke about this, like just this time. And so I think I'm just trying to make ways of articulating these things in very human, very easy words, very chilled, lived, experienced ways, to give it back to us because we already own it, we already have it, which is also a question of past, future, present, transcendence. Like, I guess transcendence, the question on transcendence is, have I transcended? Can I still be here if I transcend the space? Can I still be here, you know? And yes, you know, I'm here, I'm there. So yeah, I think it's just I'm living my lived experience through the questioning, and I'm using the digital tools, and I'm teaching myself more digital tools the same way I would teach myself harder language or try run instead of walk, you know, like it's this balance of life and seeing nature and technology and the self as all like entangled things that communicate to each other the same way technology does. So like all these things, I'm technology, it's technology, we technology. Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. This is interesting because this is the part of this panel that is unexpected to me, you know, because we came here, you know, the theme is futuring towards freedom, and we're like, yeah, we're going to talk about the future and how we can like create worlds. But you and Dini especially are saying, you know, if I understand your answer correctly, it's like it's not necessarily, the future is not necessarily there. It's already happening, it's already here. And your work is interested in kind of just like unearthing and revealing what already is, and in helping us, you know, use the word articulate. It's kind of like articulate what already exists, but maybe we don't necessarily sense as readily as what we consider is present reality. You know, so that's very like surprising and interesting to me. And it's even, you know, going to you, Dini, I kind of have to reconsider the question that I was going to ask you ahead of this. Because, you know, the question will kind of like center that binary of like, oh, you know, present reality versus future reality. But just like listening to your presentation, and especially the Umale Okere, did I pronounce it well? The work about the Olu of Worry. I didn't pronounce it well. That smile, you're like, now.
No, it's cool. It's
Okay.
Umale, but it's cool.
Male,
Yeah,
okay.
Umale. Yeah.
Yeah. Um, so I'll ask you about Grill's helmet. Um,
Yeah.
you know, and I'm going to put an asterisk in this question because of kind of like what you discussed about, you know, Sasa and Zamani, and it's not linear. It's kind of already always happening, you know. So that's the asterisk in this question. In Greer's helmet, the Greer's exploration of time is halted by the practice of a world that is reminiscent of the one we currently live in. Do your speculative explorations generally tend to succumb to the pressures of the present in this way? Or do they open up to possibilities of freedom in the future, or both? How does your work consider that interplay between what is and what could be? So yeah.
Yeah. Um, I would say I don't think my work or how I think about it succumbs to, you know, what the present currently is. It's just more about, like you said, articulating it. Like, how can we really see it for what it is? How can we, you know, see this present for what it really is? And how can we then move on into creating the realities that we really want to see, and realities that would really work for us as a collective, as people, as humans? And how can this relationship also, you know, come into play with the modern humans, the non-humans? How can we sort of move on away from dominant modes of thinking about time, thinking about space, thinking about how we exchange, you know, like ideas are exchanged for money, people have been exchanged for money, you know, like how can we move away from all this thinking? And yeah, and those are happening in the present. And if we want to even think about it on a deeper level, the, you know, the effects of the slave trade is still happening right now. You know, the effects um of everything, like of everything that has happened to us as people of African descent, it's still happening right now. All of those effects are still happening in the present. We're still feeling them when we're in a sort of looped time, but we're hurrying towards a future that, you know, it's not ours. Are we really thinking about this future in a more like nuanced way? Are we like, you know, being mellow about it, being chill about it, as opposed to rushing around, you know? Um, in just randomly thinking about when I can't remember what created like the laser technology, for example. When it was created, it was like a bulky tool and something, and now we use it in raves, at events. We use it, you know, to scan the eyes. We use it in, I don't know if phones have lasers now, like, you know, it's gone on to like medical applications and all of that. So it's about like when we're creating these technologies, we have no idea what they are going to be used for in, you know, let's look at gunpowder and fireworks, for example. The same thing, you know, but two different use cases. Let's look at you know, bioenhancement like surgery and all of that. Like it was more of a medical procedure, but now it's a cosmetic procedure. So we have no handle over this technology that we're creating. So we're thinking about AI and, you know, quantum is there. We're thinking about quantum technology. There's also more things we haven't thought about yet that we're not thinking about currently, but um it's I think I deviated from the question, but but yeah, like it's just about being framed in the present.
Yeah.
Being framed in the present while thinking about these futures. And for me, the future is not singular. I see the future as multiple, like there's a multiplicity in how we are experiencing these things. So like I like to sort of bring that into how I'm thinking about my work, my practice moving forward. And also like to involve the community, the people I'm thinking about in this future. I like to involve their thoughts, their processes into what I'm thinking about. So it's a sort of sometimes it's sort of long process as opposed to something that's rushed. And you know, in this time we're living in, everything has to be on speed. So it's
Mm,
yeah.
yeah. Um, yeah. Yeah. I appreciate, you know, your presentation, both you and Natalie, because I think it's especially what you're saying about the aftershocks of like we're still living in the effects of things that happened centuries ago.
Yeah.
It just makes that idea of Sasa and Zamani, like the idea of cyclical time is more real. And rather than sort of like hurry forward, kind of like deal with the stay in the present and heal, you know, like you
Yeah.
said, how did you say the present, the only the quote you had at the beginning, I wrote it down. Uh, the present is the only future we will ever, you know. So
Yeah.
it's like the way to move forward um is to recreate now, you know, which and now this is me going into the final question before I open it up to the audience. It's a question for you both. Um, you know, this is our last of 12 events in this cycle of programming for future inventions. And every event in some way or other has been connected with, I mean, even the idea of future inventions is even in the name, you know, where we're running on the belief that, you know, the future is the you know, reality, the life we live, the world that as it exists is not something that is set in stone. It's not finite. It's up for discussion. It's up for renegotiation. It's, you know, we're running on code, but that code can be rewritten essentially. And that's kind of like what all our work is geared towards, right? So even a conversation like this is kind of, we're trying to unpack like, you know, this future this reality that we want to inhabit collectively. Like, first of all, what is it? And how can we sort of like, work our way towards it? Because it's kind of like dismantle the structures or untangle the code that has currently been written and rewrite it, you know. And just to what we just said, it's not about rushing forward, but it's about like doubling down on where we are now and kind of like unpacking it and putting it back together, you know. So I say all that to ask this question, which is the final question that I'll ask. Acknowledging our theme of futuring towards freedom, what does a world built around our deepest desires for freedom look like to both you, Natalie, and to Dini? How would your approach to constructing this world using the tools, techniques, and most importantly, thinking that powers your work, like, what does that look like? Yeah. Whoever wants to go first.
I think I kind of know my answer. And it's that I don't know, essentially. But what I do know, I think where I'm speaking from as like a digital artist who makes use of all types of technologies, who feels like I don't feel behind in what I've tapped into technologically. But I feel behind in the reasoning and the source and the value of what we're doing sometimes as artists. And this is why I feel like I'm trying to sink deeper into the roots of like authenticity, love, peace, harmony, and using the digital to do something different. But when I thought about this question, I thought it's actually quite a hard question because futuring and using technology and thinking of freedom when the current again like needs its own healing, it needs its own sorting, it needs like transcribing, understanding. Like there are so many things that I see it as a garden. I actually weirdly had a conversation with a friend today and I was saying like I see it as a garden, and it's a garden that has been running and going and going and going and going. And I can't just come and like there's valuable things under the ground, there's valuable things hiding, there's special things. But there's also weeds, there's also death, there's bad things happening, there's so much to clean. So for me, I've first realized that like there's nothing for me to build. Like this is why my artistic practice is also sitting in this like technologically advanced, but for what? Space, which I really hope I get out of because this is my job. So I really hope like I can like move beyond this and keep creating, keep mobilizing the technology to move forward and to spread this in different, ambiguous, beautiful ways. But I wanted to just say, like, yeah, I think that we need to first clean, first read, transcribe, rewrite, take away, rethink, section, dream more abundantly. I think like before we build, we should ask ourselves if where we are now is like if the resources, the thinking, the mentality, the community, like coming together, the closeness, like all of these networks that similar to technology, like what is the system of the network and is the network healthy for us to build anything on top of it? So I think instead of caring a lot about the future, like we all spoke about this, like the future is very much in the present, like you transcend, but actually it makes you realize that you're here more than anywhere. We look in the future, but we're really here. So I really want to ask myself these questions within my artistic practice, and like again, not so heavy on the theory of it and the visual and the technicalities of it, but also like once again going back to the energy, the wisdom, the again healing, the love, the compassion, the safe portal that it should be, the safe archive space that it should be, this generator that it should be. So this is a really sick machine, but an extremely powerful machine that could build any future. But we have to know our machine. We have to know what our machine needs. We have to care about creating those systems and the things that will fuel that machine sustainably. We have to care about the creation of those things themselves and the people that have to make them, the people that use them, how these things are used, how are they weaponized, how have they been weaponized, how can we heal the communities where like weaponization has happened. So I think, yeah, for me, I'm very much like stepping back as much as I'm stepping forward because I've realized that I might be like overloading the internet myself with just unclear murmurs and futuristic hopes and speculations. But yeah, I think the work needs to be embodied. We need to tap into ourselves and hear and care and share. Um, and then we'll talk about building and clean and come together. Because I think the building sounds scary to me. I'm like, what if we went back a little, like actually take some things back? But yeah, also believe that it could be multi-dimensional. Like it doesn't have to be in a certain timeline, doesn't have to be in certain constructions, doesn't have to be in certain lineages, frameworks, context. I think there's like a deep sharing that is possible. And yeah, and I think that technology essentially is like the reason that we hold it is because it is the driver. But yeah, it's very important to be a healthy, not drunk driver. Let's be like careful, considerate, loving drivers to like the people who are on the road and ourselves. So yeah, just the ethics of it. I think building and healing the ethics, healing the roots from a cellular level, like creating new neural pathways, and then thinking about why we need to build it and what world we're building it for. Yeah.
Yeah, I could cry. That's such a powerful answer and very brave, especially because we're in a time when people feel like there's no time, and there's such an impulse to rush ahead. So to be deliberate to say, actually, no, I want to take this time to first like sit and unpack things is very brave and very inspiring. Even for I'm sure all of us in this chat as people who are in some ways interested in how to in just like using these tools. So yes, thank you very much for that. Very very wise response. Yeah. Did you have anything to see?
Honestly, I forgot the questions. I was listening
uh,
to Natalie and I forgot the questions.
what? I don't want to ask it again. Like, I
But
feel like wherever you are, like wherever your head is, just go from there.
so I think what I can remember is you asking something about future and towards freedom.
Yeah, okay.
And yeah, but 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 I'm also thinking about it in that sense, but what if we could be free in the present, you know? What if just yeah, I think I can remember you asking something about the walls we're shaping or building and what it will be like or what it could feel like. I mean, I'm missing that, but I mean the world I want to see is one where, I can just be by the ocean early in the morning, watch just before the sunrise and just watching the sunrise and just watching people being free, being able to make use of the space like it's theirs without having to, you know, pay for it. It's a world where we don't see um, technology, cars, airplanes and whatnot as status symbols. It's more about, connection with the people and the environment. It's a world where we're not hurting the environment, where we're not constantly, destroying what's been here. And I'm sorry I'm taking it a little bit away. But let's look about here in Lagos, for example, there's a lot of like pollution, in form of plastic. plastic has become like a new material that we're building this world of. And I wonder what it will be like in, you know, in the next 100 years if we're looking at the future. Will that future be free? You know, would people be free in that future, free from those excesses? There's times where I want to like do some stuff and people just say, why don't you just buy it? And I'm like, I want to create it. I want to, you know, take time out and, you know, build this thing from scratch as opposed to just buying it. So it's there's a lot of commodification going on. And that's also what I'm thinking about in the story with the Grail's helmet, for example. It's about the commodification of our memories, you know. I mean, you look behind me, you can see like that's Idia. I'm the Idia mask. And it's like one of the most popular African symbols. But it's sort of the idea of it, the memory of this thing is constantly being commodified as with so many artifacts, you know, from our ancestors, from the past and all of that. And what used to be more functional for them, what used to be more a form of keeping history, a form of transcribing things has become a commodity. You know, art used to be more functional. You know, it was a way to just relate and to keep times, to keep the time in the form of material, but it's become a commodity. We always have to sell, you know, the art. We always have to sell these ideas. There's a commodification of everything going on. And this is me taking it back to plastic again. Not that I'm so interested in it, but but taking it back to, you know, the form in which we use plastic currently is it's only been like this for, let's say, the past 15, 20 years, and now there's plastic everywhere. Our ancestors didn't leave anything like this in the waters. Like 50 years ago, 60 years ago, 100 years ago, there was no plastic. The forms of materials they used was more in tune with, you know, the earth, with the cycles, with the times, the mud, as opposed to sand and cement and all of that, like all these forms of synthetic, fast methods of creating stuff, you know, like, and now there's plastic everywhere and we don't know what to do with it. And that's one of the lightest technology. Look what we did with the atomic bomb, you know. Look what we're doing with, you know, there's just so much to unpack. So, but what if we're free right now? What if people in Congo are free right now? What if people in Jos are free right now, you know, to be able to move around? Like being in Lagos for me also has been a sort of restrictive environment, if I dare say. You know, like this, there's just so much to unpack just being here, Osama, you know. And the idea of, you know, slowing down and thinking about time in this manner actually happened for me when I was in residency in Dar es Salaam. And, you know, I was waking up every day and just walking to, you know, to the beach side before the sunrise and just sitting there watching people just make use of the space because it's theirs, even though it's not like in this, there's a lot of gentrification going on in the environment. So it may not be theirs for forever, like for the next 10, 20 years, but for now it's theirs. And watching that, just being able to be part of that experience made me actually slow down. Like I really, really felt peace, you know, in that space, just watching the people just be themselves, just be able to like the future for me is one where I can just wake up and just get fruits outside on the corner like this. There's fruits growing, there's plants everywhere, you know. Yeah, and we're one with ourselves. The future for me is one where there are no walls, where we live like our ancestors did. There are no fences, you know. All the structures that have been built in this sort of individual complexes. I don't I don't know. I don't know what that means. And it's also taking this away from right now. Let's look at like the whole space race, the whole AI space right now. All this. I think I was talking to Philip, my friend, a few days ago about it. This whole frontier modeling. It's a sort of like colonial term. You know, all those terms they're using for space, like colonizing space and all of that, it's being repeated again. And in these particular futures they're creating, people like you and I don't exist in those futures because it's not for us. So I guess we sort of have to create ours, rethinking what do we need to colonize another world for when this one is, you know, in such a rut? What can we do, you know, about this one world we're living in? What can we do about the next person, the environment? What can we do about, you know, the memory of our ancestors? Um, there's just so much to unpack, and there's just so much we can learn. Like I currently have like a little drawing, a silly drawing of some Khoisan um cave um cave painting where they're painting the stars and all of that. And we need to go back to those forms of thinking and see like how we can expand on it from where the ancestors left off. Like how did they make this? How can we expand on this? How can we bring it into our lived reality? Like our ancestral religions, technologies, and whatnot are being demonized constantly. The future for me is where I see stuff that's African and I'm happy. Like I don't feel any form of fear. I'm not saying our ancestors never did, anything wrong to themselves or whatnot. I'm not, glorifying anything. I'm just saying like what would it feel like to actually speak in a language that's African? I'm speaking to you in English right now because it's our general language. What would it be like to speak in something that all of us can actually understand? And even if we don't, how can we try to, create stuff like that? How can we revisit all these things and, expand on these technologies that were already there? I think I'm going way off, but that's the future I want to see, a future that's African, a future that looks like me and you. Yeah.
Yeah, beautiful. Beautiful, beautiful. Yes, yes. I think it really ties into your presentation. Yeah, beautifully said. There is a lot of fear around our identity, and our history, and it would be nice to, just like sit down and be like, what's up with that? Like, why so much angst? So yes, thank you both, for sharing these responses. They're very rich. I think I mean, we're over time now by 4 minutes. So I mean, if you want to leave, thank you so much for coming. That's perfectly okay. But if you have a question, if you can stay and you have a question, um, and if that's okay, Dini and Natalie, to just um stay a bit for maybe a question or two if anybody has one. Going once, going twice. Okay. Okay. Cool. Well, then I guess that brings us to the end of not just the session, but the first cycle for future inventions. Um, yeah, thank you so much for everyone who's come tonight and on any other nights that we've hosted an event. Thank you for traveling with us. This is very exciting. I feel like these conversations that we're having um, just show what's possible and what's needed, and it's very inspiring to know that there is space, like our dreams and these futures that we're conceiving, they're not, we're not foolish. The fact that we're all here, like Natalie said, and we're all having these conversations, I think it says a lot. So yeah, that really like inspires me and excites me. And yeah, thank you so much for being here. Yeah.
No, yeah, that says, oh yeah, as Zuma said, this is our last event of Cycle 1. We will see you again later this year, likely October for Cycle 2. So stay tuned if you're signed up to our newsletter, which if you're here today, you are either signed up or about to be signed up to our newsletter, you will hear about it first. And again, just a huge thank you. And I'm already seeing some people in the chat saying specific things that really resonate with them. Reach out to the guest speakers. That's the beautiful thing about cultivating a space like this is, the conversation lives on. You mention somebody's name in a room and they speak at something else, or you reach out to them one-on-one about an idea. So reach out to the speakers, follow their work. Yes, I believe the invite also had details to the Instagram and website. So please do, and everybody just have a lovely spring or winter if you're on the other side of things like Natalie is. Take care.
Take care and thank you so much.
Thank you both. You've been
Thank you,
awesome.
I have
guys.
one
Thank
question
you.
before we go. Sorry to bring us back. I was going to ask how you feel, this being the close of a particular stretch of
Yeah.
events, stretch of time. Yeah, how do you feel? Like what has resonated with you so far, and
Yeah.
what would you be bringing, moving forward towards freedom?
Yeah, I think in terms of having the two of you present, as well as the other artists who we've engaged with on this cycle from the panel, or be it through reading their work, or adding it to our resource list, would be, like has been said already, that the present is here today. Not only are we making the present, not the future is here today. Not only are we making the future, through what the actions that take place now, quite literally, there are people who, in their work, individuals, but also like communities, who we see other possibilities. And for me, I know, actually, or for us at Future Inventions, when we talk about how we think about the future, is that it's not this point that we reach, it's like slowly co-created, and that's quite evident, and that's really what we want to platform with our programming, is that there's other ways of doing things, there's people who are doing other things, and we don't have to just follow, I don't know, big tech or like large corporations, and how they want us to think about reality.
Thank you. Thank you so much. That was great.
Me, I'm just happy.
That's super. Glad you are.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you for the space. I'm really excited for you guys, but in general, I think it's yeah, it's a really amazing space in general. And I think the intentions are good and can only be expansive. So it's really cool that people are mobilizing like the questions and the curiosity into action, into formats, into resources, and into creating networks where these things can be said and heard and shared. So yeah, it's really special.
Yeah, so grateful for both of you having agreed to our invite, and I will stop the recording here.